Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. And thank you for joining this kind of special virtual event in the preparation and in the lead to the UN Statistical Commission 57th session on Beyond GDP, Measuring Progress, Dialogue with Experts from the Secretary General's High-Level Expert on Beyond GDP. I'd like to welcome you all for the event. Let me introduce myself quickly. I am Amri Noor. I am the lead of the Beyond GDP project in the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the Chief of Data Innovation and Capacity Branch at the UN Statistical Division, and I will be the moderator of this event. I see that we already have more than 220 participants, so I thank you and welcome you all, and if anything, it's a testimony for the importance of this event for the UN statistical community and the UN Statistical Commission in having this event. This event comes as part, obviously, of the broad consultations that are undertaken and were undertaken by the high-level expert group of the Secretary General on Beyond GDP. But this consultation, I have to say, carries a particular weight for all of us and also for the experts. So it's not only the mandate of the HLG requires to build on the work of the UN Statistical Commission, for which you are the custodians as chief statisticians and the community of the UN Statistical Commission, but also because it comes at a critical moment as the HLG is moving to really kind of fine-tune and tie the knots, hopefully, for its thinking, both conceptually and on the metrics and on its recommendations as well. Hence, your feedback and interaction would be really much needed, much appreciated, and I would encourage you to engage very lively and actively with the HLG as they do their presentations. I'm going to do, the event is recorded, so you can go back to it, and whatever you can put in the chat will also be recorded, all right? So I'm going to go for a quick run of show with all of you so that you know what to expect from this, and then we're going to initiate immediately the opening remarks and the presentations given the time constraints. So we are going to start, as you mostly have seen the run of show and the program, with a presentation by Shantanu Mukherjee, who is the acting director of the UN Statistical Division, and also the Director of the Economic Analysis and Policy Division at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Thank you, Shantanu, for opening this and for joining us. And then we're going to follow with a presentation, an introductory remark, just that set the stage by the two co-chairs of the high-level expert group, that's Nora Lustig and Kaushik Basu, all right? And then after that, we're going to go with the substantive presentations, starting by the presentation of the conceptual framework by Martine Durand, and then a presentation on the thinking on the measurement metrics by Nora Lustig, to be followed after that, but if you wish, in that context, by two illustrative presentations to kind of unpack a little bit the thinking on the measurement metrics by Kaushik Basu and Nam Pham. So I will just welcome all our experts, and also let me make a very brief presentation of the experts who are joining us today. Nora Lustig is the co-chair of the HLG on Beyond GDP. She is a professor emerita at the founding director of the Commitment to Equity Institute at Tulane University and a visiting professor in El Colegio de Mexico. She is also a non-resident scholar at the Brookings Institution, the Center for Global Development, the Georgetown University, the American Institute, the Paris School of Economics, and the Stone Center on Socioeconomic Inequality. That's among other things, so excuse my brevity for the presentation of our eminent experts. Kaushik Basu, the second co-chair of the HLG on Beyond GDP, is a professor of economics and Karl Marx Professor of International Studies at Cornell University. He was chief economist at the World Bank, and he also served as chief economic advisor to the government of India. Martine Durand is currently an independent senior international expert and consultant in official statistics. She is a member of the French Official Statistics Authority, and she was previously the OECD Chief Statistician and Director of the Statistics and Data Directorate. And Nam Pham, he is an Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Economics Ho Chi Minh City at Vietnam. He also serves as Director of the College of Economics, Law and Government at UAH and as Director of the Environment for Development Center in Vietnam. So I welcome all of you, Shantanu, the experts, and without further ado, we're going to proceed with the event. We have a big number of participants, close to 300, so I would appeal to you all for a time management, and as we move forward, obviously, we will see how this will go, but looking forward to an interactive conversation and dialogue with all. Shantanu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Amar, and greetings everybody from New York. I'm delighted that we are meeting today at the special high-level dialogue on Beyond GDP, part of our special webinar series in the lead up to the 57th session of the UN Statistical Commission. Let me welcome especially our high-level expert group co-chairs, Nora and Kaushik, the high-level expert group members, and all of you, dear friends from the statistical community across the world. Our meeting today is exceptionally well-timed. The high-level expert group is entering a final phase of its deliberations ahead of the submission of its recommendations to the Secretary General. I would like to thank all of them really for taking the time at such a busy juncture to continue their conversations with the statistical community across the world. These conversations have already provided important inputs to the high-level group. For example, the recent global online call for inputs elicited a significant number of submissions from governments, including 23 national statistical offices. Within the Statistical Commission itself, the subject of measurements that capture multiple dimensions of well-being in a holistic manner has a long provenance. I am pleased that the Commission's expert group on well-being measurement and its Friends of the Chair group on social and demographic statistics, among others, have provided conceptual and practical insights, which I trust have been helpful. Practical considerations for implementation are also available from the ongoing work of the Commission's interagency and expert group for the SDGs, especially its task team on lessons learned from SDG monitoring, and of course, from the extensive experience of UNST and other international bodies with statistical capacity development. Ladies and gentlemen, the call to develop measures that go beyond gross domestic product is not new. But the political momentum presents a unique opportunity at this time. In September 2024, as many of you know, heads of state and government adopted the Pact for the Future, requesting the UN Secretary General to advance work on metrics for progress on sustainable development that complement and go beyond GDP. This independent high-level expert group has been framed in response to this request, and they have been tasked with, among others, developing recommendations for a limited number of country-owned and universally applicable indicators that complement and go beyond GDP. The group has worked intensively over the past few months, launching an interim report at the Second World Summit for Social Development in Doha, and conducting wide-ranging consultations on its preliminary findings with a number of constituencies. In the process, the high-level expert group has been attentive to coherence with existing statistical standards and systems, alignment with global indicator frameworks, data availability across countries, and implementation feasibility. I'm delighted that so many of you are joining today because these are areas where your knowledge is crucial. You are the architects and custodians of the data systems that will ultimately bring any framework that goes beyond GDP to life. Your expertise is going to be indispensable both today and as we go forward. Today's event is an opportunity, a valuable one, for you to engage directly with the experts of the high-level group to share your perspectives on these important matters. I would encourage an open and candid exchange. The high-level expert group members joining us are eager to hear from you. Your feedback will help ensure that the final recommendations are conceptually sound and also statistically robust and practically implementable. And as we go forward with this work, we look forward to further productive discussions at the Statistical Commission itself in March, at which I hope many of you will participate. With that, I hand you over to Amr from my team, who will moderate our session, and I thank you once again for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shantanu, and thank you for joining us for this opening remark, which do actually, I think, put a good frame and your invite for all the participants as we move forward for a candid exchange and the feedback really for the betterment of the output and recommendations. So I'll move now to Nora and Kaushik for kind of brief introductory remark for setting the stage. Let's start by you, Nora, and then we'll move to Kaushik. You are on mute. Please unmute, Nora.
Thank you. Thank you very much, by the way, to Amr and Shantanu for the introductions and for pointing out that this is a very important, crucial meeting for us in consulting with the statistical community. I'm amazed the turnout. We're reaching 350. I think this is the largest meeting I ever had virtually. So it augurs a very interesting occasion, I think. Let me share just a few slides so that I like to put things in slides so that besides listening, then there's something in writing that people can go back to if they want to refresh what they saw in their in the meeting that they attended. So let me just make sure that we have the right slide. So can you see my screen?
Yes, Nora.
All right. So as Amr and Shantanu mentioned, we exist because there's been a mandate that came from Pact for the Future, and that's synthesized in Action 53. What's highlighted here is that they asked, there was a request to the Secretary General to establish an independent group. And this independent group was established by the UN Secretary General in May 2025. This reveals the compressed time we've had to work on something that's so ambitious, and that has been one of our challenges. And as Shantanu mentioned, we were tasked with developing a set of universally applicable, limited set, I always underscore that, of universally applicable country-owned indicators that also reflect the multidimensionality of well-being. HLG is an independent group, and it's supported by UN-led Secretariat, a fantastic group. Amr is here, Elena is here, and others that are members of the Secretariat. We are 14 experts from diverse academic and policy backgrounds. And we've taken the sort of the humble approach of being aware that there has been many preceding efforts and frameworks that have been put forward in the Beyond GDP imaginary, and we have tried to introduce new thinking, not just for the sake of having new thinking, but of things that we think should be added to the existing frameworks. This is us. As you can see, it's a friendly group, very diverse, and we have met in person once in New York, and we're going to meet again this week later in Geneva. So we start from the premise that we do have a need for a new compass because, as we all know, GDP is a measure of economic activity or output, not well-being. It does miss aspects that are as important as how well-being is distributed, what are the extent of deprivations in the multiple areas of well-being, and what it means for the future. And in particular, we think that one aspect, and I'm sure Martin will delve on it, that has been missed in the well-being analysis and measurement in the past is to emphasize aspects that have to do with human rights, peace, security, which are essential for well-being. Nobody can be said to enjoy well-being if they live under war or human rights are egregiously overlooked. Beyond GDP then means going beyond income, beyond averages, beyond today, and beyond national boundaries. And that's something that we are trying to incorporate in the measurement that we will propose to the Secretary General and hopefully eventually be adopted globally. So a synthesis of our vision could be that we want to make the invisible visible. So the environmental destruction, domestic violence, unpaid care work, those are examples. Give voice to the voiceless, those who are left behind, those who are oppressed, and future generations. We want to recognize that people and planet are interconnected. So, and also understand well-being today, equitable and sustainable through a broader context that includes the social relationships, institutions, and our planetary context. What is new? I think that what is new in this initiative is that apparently it's the first time that member states have requested the UN Secretary General office to come up with a set of limited indicators. The second thing is that we think that our conceptual framework is more ambitious than previous ones, and Martin will discuss about them. And then we have some new ideas in terms of measurement, including exploring different ways in which we can have a headline indicator that captures dimensions that GDP per capita by itself cannot. Last but not least, I think it's very important to underscore that we're proposing to complement GDP, not to replace it, and that our proposals are complementary to the others that are ongoing in different parts of the UN system and beyond. Those include the initiatives undertaken by the System of National Accounts. We're not recommending new ways to measure GDP. We do not have that expertise, and we rely on all the initiatives that have to do with how to measure GDP better. And we understand that SNA 2025 has introduced a number of improvements, especially to capture the depreciation of natural capital better. We also are complementary to the existing Beyond GDP efforts, the SDGs, or the ones that have been undertaken nationally or regionally. We do not intend to replace them if they can continue in parallel, but we want to provide a metric that can be applied universally in tandem. We're complementary also to something that's happening in the Human Development Report Office, because they're analyzing to eventually adopt an Human Development Index that is grounded in theory, and it would be compatible to the one that we've been exploring within the HLG. So to end, I want to thank explicitly Shantanu and Amer, and to Amer's team, Elena de Jesus, Maria Cinca, and Clarence Leo for their superb work in organizing this important meeting, and the statistical community for the strong turnout and interest. We really look forward to your questions, feedback, and comments. We're really here to listen and hopefully clarify your concerns. And we also hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that will continue even after we submit our report in different capacities. I think the engagement between the Statistical Commission and the statistical community work-wise with the scholars and practitioners is going to be very welcome. thank you. And now on to you, Kaushik, or Amr.
Thank you very much, Nora. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this introduction and for the important points, and for reminding everybody that all this work really is anchored in the mandate, and the mandate really is anchored and is stemming from the work, the Pact of the Future, and is part of the journey of the Church for really an integrated and balanced sustainable development. We should all recall that there was a mandate already almost in the SDG 1719 to have a kind of complementary, a little bit measure to the Beyond GDP, but as you said, the Pact for the Future gave the political momentum and the most explicit mandate yet to the Secretary General to proceed with this effort in a comprehensive, really manner. Also, you alluded to the importance and criticality of the timing. The meeting that you are having in Geneva is going to be critical, and that's why this meeting and this dialogue, as I said, really is very critical and important to hear to the community and to the Statistical Commission. So without further ado, I'll go to Kaushik. Would you like to come in with some words, please, Kaushik? Come in, please.
Amir, thank you very much. Shantanu, Martin, Nora, Nam, just the people I see in front of me. I see there are a whole lot of people otherwise listening. Thank you very much. What I want to do at this stage is just a few opening remarks. And then I do have PowerPoint, which I will bring in later, where there are virtually questions that I want to direct at the statisticians. But I know Martin has interesting things to say, so I'll wait for that before I bring my PowerPoint in. But just a few opening remarks. When I was asked to co-chair this, and this committee was talked about, for me, this was extremely important because of my experience from the World Bank days. You do see countries getting locked into a race with what is measured. In fact, there's the start of the report by Stiglitz, Sen and Fitoussi begins by saying we will not change our behavior unless we change the way we measure economic performance. And you see this. There are political leaders who will whip up enthusiasm around GDP. It's measured, that's what you're going after. And this particular race, which is narrowly focused on GDP, and you're trying to hit the goalpost with that, I do believe has done a lot of damage to the world, and it's marshaled a sort of populism around that, which by bringing in new measures, we are hopeful that we will change. I should also say that I'm very grateful for this meeting with the Statistical Commission, and I will say what I'm hoping that we will get out from you. We've had wide consultations up to now. I believe it was Elena who did a lovely summary. So that's available to see of the opinions that we've got from all across the board. But for me, the meeting with statisticians is especially important. And I will tell you where I'm hoping to get some reaction from all of you. And then I will come back with more detailed questions later on when I'm speaking. You can create a box where you've said it all, but the box will have very little effect. Amartya Sen has a beautiful paper called Description as Choice, where he points out that whenever you're describing something, you have to choose what you're picking out. If by description you repeat, when you describe yesterday, if you repeat what happened yesterday, you get nothing. Description is always entails choice, and that's what you want to do. There are two kinds of problems that can arise. One is, yes, you want a box with everything important in there, but then you want to suggest some definite measures. Here, I will give you some examples later on, but I would love to get some feedback about the kinds of measures we are thinking of. Are they really measurable? Number two, there is a following problem, which I can give you a very concrete experience of mine, which got me sensitive to this. In the World Bank, we decided there's this report that comes out called Shared Prosperity. It began, I think, a little bit before Haishan joined us. The effort began, but it was finished after Haishan had come into the World Bank. This was an effort to measure how the bottom segment of each country is doing. So basically, you start up a competition not about overall GDP or per capita GDP, but the performance of the bottom segment. We wrote out a very neat, clean measure, which is easy to write up, nothing complicated we wrote up. Then we realized, we had a hunch, that the way GDP is measured statistically, there are two very different ways of doing it. One is you can take the goods and services in the country and come from the top. Other is you can have data on households and aggregate the households and get there. Whole lot of emerging economies do not do it from this bottom-up method. So when you say you want to know how the bottom 40% is performing, we discovered within inverted commas, at one level we knew that a whole host of countries just did not have the capacity to do this, the statistical capacity. So if you look at the first shared prosperity report, it's just a question of 40 or 50 countries for which we gave the data, the rest didn't have. But it triggered off one important change. It also started statistical work. We were going out to countries, sub-Saharan African countries, and urging them that, look, this is the measure which we are urging every country to come up with, for which you also need statistical efforts to collect data, maybe randomized households drawn and studies of that. So I'm hoping that we will get both a couple of concrete measures, and then some of these measures, they must be conceptually clear, but at the same time, all countries may not have the capacity to come out with these. But I'm hoping that this will also start out a statistical venture where we will push countries to do this. So let me stop with opening remarks, and then I'll give you some concrete questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taoufik, for this remarks as well. And I think, as you say, and as Nora also kind of re-emphasized, I mean, your work obviously builds on a lot of previous work done, all right? So it comes in a bigger context, of course, and the fact that all of you have gone through this kind of wealth of previous frameworks and initiatives, and also reviewed the work of the UN Statistical Commission and the standards and systems. That brings a lot of richness, hopefully, to your work, as we will hear. The emphasis, again, that was done about that you are here to listen, all right? And you did already, again and again, as all of us emphasize the importance of this event in particular. We have already more than 400 participants. As Nora said, we have done a lot of consultations. 400 probably is a new record for the turnout in these consultations. But that's because this is a community, as everybody said, that, as we say in Egypt, where I come, they will have their hands in fire. They will have to carry this out. They will have to implement it. They will have to see where the challenge in their country context. All right. So that's why listening to them is very important. And you did allude already to some of the challenges of the data availability, the capacity, the country context and experience. And that's why we need to listen to them. So without further ado, and as I said, given the big turnout on this, all right, I would really appeal as we move now to the really kind of the meat and the presentations, to try for our speakers to abide by maybe hopefully 10 minutes for each presentation. I would appeal this so that we can really have time for our constituency to listen to them. So I'll move to Martine Durand, who will present the conceptual framework. And I would like to recall again that all this is work in progress, and it's thinking that would benefit as we move to the feedback. So please, for all the constituency, take it from that perspective. But I think we are fascinated to have this dialogue with you. Martine, up to you.
Thank you very much, Amer, and thank you to Shantanu and to all of you present here, to the two co-chairs, of course, and to my fellow members of the high-level group. I'm very pleased to have been asked by the co-chairs and by the secretary to present where our thinking stands right now on the conceptual framework. As Amer rightly pointed out, this is still work in progress. So, of course, your feedback will be very welcome. Nothing is set in stone yet, so we are on the listening mode, as already been said. I cannot resist. Before you put the chart on, could you remove the chart for the moment, please? Elena, yes, thank you. I'll tell you when to put it on. Before, I cannot resist adding to what Kaushik said when he mentioned the Stiglitz and Fitoussi report, which of course is a seminal work that did not start because there were lots of things being done before, but really crystallized a lot of ideas and experiences along this agenda on Beyond GDP. And he mentioned a quote at the beginning of the report. One other thing that was said extensively by Joe Stiglitz and by others is that we should stop treasuring what we measure. Instead, we should measure what we treasure. And I think that's where this whole Beyond GDP agenda is about, and measuring what matters most to people's life, indeed. So second thing I would like to say is that I'm very glad that we're having this meeting, because I have the feeling that I'm back at home to some extent. I've attended the Statistical Commission for 10 years when I was the chief statistician at the OECD, and it feels very comfortable to some extent to be back with you today and hear what you have to say. Another reason is that when I was at the OECD as a chief statistician, as many of you will know, we took it very seriously to help implementing the recommendations in the Stiglitz and Fitoussi reporting. In fact, we even hosted a follow-up to that first initiative where Nora was a member of the group that we put up at the time. And we launched in 2011 the Better Life initiative together with the Better Life Index. And the OECD, I should say, was at the forefront really on this Beyond GDP agenda. So I'm really happy to bring that knowledge and experience, as Kaushik did from the World Bank perspective and other experts from their own perspective, onto the work of the high-level group. And what's been very interesting really is to see that the work by all of us and starting, capitalizing on the Stiglitz and Fitoussi report really was at the origin of a large number of initiatives really in countries to develop their own framework on measuring well-being beyond GDP. They develop their frameworks, both statistical but also policy frameworks, because as Amr said at the beginning, and Kaushik emphasized as well, is good to measure, but then it has to be implemented, and that it has to change actually the lives of people. Otherwise, you sit on an amount of numbers, but if it's not used in policy, it's really in decision making, not only by policymakers but also by citizens and the public at large. Then you have gone only half of the way. And I'd like to say that really re-emphasize that what I will be showing in a minute is really building on those initiatives that we have been looking at very extensively. We've had a lot of consultations and auditions of the groups of the countries that have developed their own statistical well-being frameworks, and including, of course, leading up to the SDGs. So we should really recognize all these inputs from all these communities, and in particular, the statistical community. So now please do show the chart. I just wanted to situate a little bit where we're coming from. So here we are with what we will be proposing, and of course that, again, this is preliminary, still work in progress, but essentially we're concentrating on an integrated framework for measuring progress under the heading of equitable, inclusive, and sustainable well-being. So we have these three pillars. We have current well-being. We want to discuss as well the distribution of well-being, and we want to discuss the sustainability of well-being. I'm sure many of you will recognize those three pillars, which we found almost in every single frameworks that we have been studying since we started our work. Current well-being, meaning beyond material well-being, to encompass a number of other very important domains of lives for what matters in people's lives. Inclusive, because it has to be distributed, both across country, within the countries, but within society as well. And of course, we have to think about the future as well. It's good enough to have a satisfying well-being today, but if it at the expense of future generations, then we've not achieved our objectives. So you will recognize those three pillars that are common to many of the frameworks. So what's new in what we're proposing? What is it that Nora said? We hope that we're adding some thinking into this analysis of well-being. I mean, in a sense, it's natural that the world keeps moving and the thinking keeps moving as well. There are lots of initiatives as well, so we have to try to bring all this together and not continue to do the same or repeat what others have done. There would be no point in doing that. So what's new in what we're proposing? First of all, I think perhaps, and maybe you will agree with that, is that our framework, if you go at the bottom of this chart, is really is grounded in the idea that peace, and security, human rights, respect for the planet are really the foundations and the foundational principles of progress. The ability to live in peace rather than in violent conflict, the right to be an equal and respected human being and participating member of society, and the fact that we have to recognize that we're not just here today, but also for tomorrow, and we have to respect the planet and the future generations is really the foundation of what we think on which well-being lie. So our framework really recognizes those foundations, which you will recognize, of course, in the UN Charter as well. So nothing really to be surprised of, but putting it at the center stage of where you build a house from, I think is very important for us. What else is new in here, if I take it? The second is that if you look at the center of the chart, is that really we place both people and the planet at the center of our conceptual framework, taking this duality as a starting point. In fact, this reflects the recognition that people and the planet are deeply interdependent, that any effort to assess current and equitable, inclusive well-being must account for both. So this duality looks at how humans affect the planet and how without a planet, in fact, there would be no lives for people. So we have really we're really putting on a lot of emphasis on this duality of people and the planet. Planetary well-being, both positive and negative, is increasingly shaped by human activity. What else? Third, I think is new, is that the most of the frameworks that we have been looking at, that existing framework, really focus, a lot of them actually focus on the individual, on the person, where we believe that our framework tries to broaden this notion of well-being, and rather than focusing exclusively on individual well-being, it also encompasses societal well-being and planetary well-being. So you will see those two boxes under today and tomorrow, where we talk about individual, societal, and planet well-being for current well-being, and for tomorrow, individual, societal, and planet sustainability and resilience. So we believe that an individual is embedded in a society and a community, and its well-being, his or her well-being, cannot actually be captured accurately by simply aggregating individual assessments. It would be too reductive not to look at the fundamental social nature of human life. I mean, we talk a lot about being a member of the global world and the planet, but being part of a community of the society is also fundamentally important for well-being. Fourth, and that's something that is common to many frameworks, so that's not really new, but we do make the distinction between today and tomorrow. Today is more interested in flows, and tomorrow more in stocks or capitals or wealth, depending on how you want to call it. And so we make the distinction between what is happening today and what is happening tomorrow. When we talk about today and current well-being in particular, I'm not going to go through all of the details, but that includes, as we said, current well-being with many other domains than just income or material well-being, to encompass health, education, subjective well-being, and so on. But Nora will go into that in greater detail in a moment, so I'm not going to develop that. But that's also very common to many frameworks. When we talk about equity and inclusiveness, we mean that the distribution of this well-being has to be equitably distributed, but not only at the individual level, again, but also in terms of the community and society. This is why we're also interested beyond vertical inequalities and deprivations. We're also interested in horizontal inequalities, gender, whether you are living in a poor environment where you're less educated than others, and so on, is part of being an inclusive society. And of course, being deprived in many dimensions is also part of being part of the community. So the whole notion of social cohesion appears here as being fundamental in our approach. Finally, of course, under current well-being, we need to make sure that we have a livable natural environment through, for instance, environmental quality of life, air, water that we get, and so on and so forth. So for the future, we focus on stocks where we concentrate on the capital approach, which again is very common to many of the other frameworks, with economic, human, and social capital and natural capital. But we also put a lot of emphasis, and that's perhaps new, again, on this notion of institutional capital, because we are part of that society and the common public goods beyond just the countries, but also the common public goods that are important. Finally, 2 points I want to emphasize as well. If you look at the right-hand side of this chart, and Nora mentioned that as well, we cannot look at well-being only in countries, individual countries in isolation. It is very important. We live in a globalized world. So accounting for cross-country spillovers is essential. There are interconnectedness that are very important. What happens in one country, this is true, of course, for the environment, but it's also true in the social space, but also for global health, for collaboration and solidarity in humanitarian aid, and so on. So you cannot export your harms to other countries, and you have to be conscious of that. So we are putting emphasis on these interdependencies and cross-country spillovers, which sometimes is not so much considered in countries' frameworks, because, first of all, it's very difficult to measure. So I like to hear a lot from you on that, but also because intuitively, the country, of course, naturally, the country's framework are designed for individual countries, but here we're thinking more globally. And I'll finish by saying that while we are, of course, also interested, if you look at the left-hand side of this chart, on the underlying enablers and capacities that, such as technology, innovation, effective governance, and so on, that are very important to achieve this well-being. But there's more means to an end. So, that will go beyond our mandate to actually look at that, and so in detail, at least in terms of measurement. So we are focusing really on the other parts of this chart. So I will stop there because I think I've taken my 10 minutes. But this is to give you, starting from equitable, inclusive, and sustainable well-being, how we are trying to put it into an integrated framework, again, around people and the planet, today, tomorrow, current well-being, and future well-being under the foundations of peace and security, human rights, and respect for the planet. Thank you very much. Very happy to hear your comments and your feedback on this framework and how it fits within what you are doing in your own country. Of course, that will require a lot of work in terms of measurement, but thankfully, all the work, good work that the countries have done under the SDGs will help fill in most of the indicators that Nora is going to present in a minute, because there's, again, a lot of work has already been done by the statistical community, perhaps more, I should say, than from the statistical community than the policy community. So thank you very much. I'll give the floor back to you, Amr.
Thank you, Martine, and thank you for this very rich presentation. And actually, there is a lot to think about. And as it said, it's work in progress. But still, as you said, I think it would be fascinating to hear some feedback on it. And thank you for highlighting some of the novelty in the thinking that we would certainly like to listen from the constituency of the UN Statistical Commission and the chief statisticians, their feedback on, you highlighted the foundations, and I think there has been a lot of discussions already related to this issue, including, if you want to relate it to the issue of the quality of growth, and while the growth in itself and the economic growth, for example, is not enough for itself, we saw a lot of countries growing very well economically and achieving a lot of percentage of growth of GDP, and yet we did see also some social unrest and popular upheavals, for instance, and so on. So this disconnect has to be achieved, obviously, somehow, and you also came back to the duality of people and planet and the intrinsic value, not obviously of the people, but also of the planet. And then, of course, you dwelt after so many things after that as well into the broader sense of the well-being, the today and tomorrow, and the interdependence and the cross-country spillover. So all of these issues would certainly, I'm not going to open the debate for them now, so bear with me. I'm going to just go with the presentations, and then I'm going to open the debate at the end of this presentation so that we can just have, hopefully, a better time. So without all this, to the challenge of measurement, and from ideas to measurement. And I think, as Martine said, I mean, we need to see somehow we measure this and how we kind of move to really measure what we treasure. And for that, I'll move to Nora Lustig, who will kind of take us to her presentation really about what thinking about the measurement metrics that are ongoing within the group. Nora, please, up to you.
Thank you, Amr, and thank you, Martine, for your eloquent presentation of the conceptual framework, which is a great introduction to the discussion that we'll have now. So let me walk the group, the attendants, through the thinking process, at least from my perspective, in terms of how do we go from ideas to measurement. We had to make a series of decisions. One thing that I should say from the outset is that I'm not going to present specific indicators because we have not chosen them. So I don't want to say this is going to be the indicator for education, this is going to be the indicator for health, until the group has agreed upon, in order not to open a discussion on something that's not been decided by the group. But I do want to share with the statistical community the ideas and the challenges, and get guidance also regarding the challenges in identifying the set of measures that we want to use to be consistent with our ambitious conceptual framework presented by Martine. So one first decision that we had to make is whether we're going to focus on outcomes or effort. And we decided to focus on outcome. The effort would be under the enablers that in Martine's graph were on the left. And what we plan to recommend is that maybe this effort in terms of measuring progress with outcomes should be followed by one in which we will be able to propose indicators of effort that may help monitor not only outcomes, but also what societies are doing to achieve those outcomes. But we're going to focus on outcomes. The second decision that we had to make is which domains beyond income do we want to include in our dashboard of limited indicators. And we chose 7 domains so far. I'm going to say them, I think, in alphabetical order. One is education. The other one is environmental quality. The other one is material well-being. The other one is health. The other one is subjective well-being, social cohesion, peace, rights, and security. Those are the 7 domains. And they're listed in the interim report in case you want to see them. There are different indicators that you can use for each one of the domains. So one of the things that we're discussing is whether are we going to choose one indicator for average achievement in every domain, or are we going to have a composite? If we have a composite, we have to decide whether it's going to be unitless or in units that are homogeneous. For a number of reasons, if we go into composites, I would prefer the latter, and I can abound on that in the conversation. So beyond the averages, average achievements in the domains that we have selected, we also want to capture the distribution and the deprivations. We think that inequality can coexist with little poverty, and lots of poverty can coexist with little inequality. So we probably would like to measure both. And deprivations are present not just in the income dimensions, but also in the other dimensions. So we may, not in all of the domains, we may be able to capture inequality and deprivations, but we'll try. And we'll try to do that not just, as Martin indicated, in terms of vertical inequalities, but also in terms of inequalities of social categories that are relevant, like gender or other cases that countries may consider interesting or applicable to their own context. But gender for sure will be one that we will propose in our recommendations. Finally, we have the discussion of how to measure sustainability. I'm still in the dashboard world, okay, of indicators. We don't have aggregates. We have composites maybe as a data reduction mechanism under each domain. If we want to preserve several indicators, we may create a composite of these several indicators based on existing data. For sustainability, NAM will go in depth on this. And we can, we know that there are 2 broad approaches out there. One is the wealth accounting, which tries to rely on estimated shadow prices, and the other one is the planetary boundaries. The one fundamental difference between the 2 is that in the wealth accounting, there is substitutability assumed among different types of natural wealth and other type of wealth, and planetary boundaries means that there are no substitutability, and when you hit certain boundaries, you may enter a world of the unknown. So the 2 need to be complemented, and NAM will present how we plan to do that in our framework. The last thing that we need to decide is whether, in addition to the dashboard of indicators that we hope would be around 20, whether individual or composite, do we want to have a headline indicator, one that aggregates the different components and that can be calculated in parallel to GDP? And there's been a lot of work on that in the scholarly literature. I don't know when it started, but one of the beginning of this is with Tony Atkinson's work in 1970, in which he proposed to adjust income per capita or GDP per capita for inequality. And that's what Kaushik is going to present us with. But there's also many other recommendations, including one that we're exploring, in which you adjust GDP per capita, not just for inequality, but for shortfalls in non-income dimensions, because the adjustment proposed by Kaushik, based on Atkinson's work, and which is subsumed in the aggregate indicator that's broader, adjust in GDP per capita for income inequality. You can also adjust GDP per capita for shortfalls in other dimensions, in health, education, environmental quality, crime, etc., and also include floors. So countries that have lower headcount ratios for poverty or lower levels of different thresholds in terms of health and education would do better than ones that are poor in a multidimensional setting. The adjustment can also be done not just for each dimension, but we can also use a multidimensional index that can be used for measuring this adjusted GDP. And the adjusted GDP for not just income inequality, which is the proposal that Kaushik will zoom in, can be done either by subtracting or discounting from GDP, making GDP smaller if the shortfalls in other places are present, or by accumulating, expanding GDP by different components depending on achievements. The mathematical formulation is the same, it just is a scalar that changes it. And let me finish my presentation by showing if we go for a headline indicator that's broader, not just adjusting for inequality, there is one option that I'd like to share, if I may, Mr. Chair, with the audience and a couple of
Nora, would you like to put your presentation then, or Elena to help you on that?
Yeah, I will. I just didn't go ahead, blow by blow because I thought it was more important to give this broader.
Thank you.
All right, you see it?
Yes, the presentation, we can see it, yeah.
All right, so I already mentioned the dashboard and the headline indicator that we are exploring. Again, everything this is here is exploratory. We need to decide whether we stop at a dashboard or we want to include an aggregate indicator. If we want to include an aggregate indicator, whether we want a broad one that includes more dimensions than income, or we just focus on income adjusted for inequality, which is what Kaushik will present later. Those are the decisions we need to make. Now, for this well-being adjusted GDP indicator, I want to show quickly what it's like. So what we're proposing, do you see my arrow?
Yes.
We do.
Okay. So this is well-being adjusted GDP. This is the name that we're giving it now. Let's say we start with GDP per capita. And as indicated by many people in the statistical community, and we agree with that, we probably should convert something into a equivalized household income as used in the disposable income as used in the national accounts. And that can be done with the pass-through coefficient that's estimated from the existing ratio of GDP per household disposable income to GDP per capita. And then, we can adjust for inequality. So what Kaushik will show includes this portion and this portion of the index. So his index is nested in ours, so to speak. And then you can also have shortages for other domains, and the deprivations, floors, the average shortfall and deprivation. And for those who are mathematically inclined, the fleshed out formula is like this, which has exponentials where the stars are reference points, and it's a function that's log linear. So how does it work in practice? Let me give you, this is a completely hypothetical example, but I thought it was important to show how it could work. So let's say you have two countries, A and B, that have the same GDP per capita. And then let's say that for those countries, there is equivalized disposable income. It could be different because it depends on the the size of the non-household sector, as we know. And if we take the reference, the middle of the values in the world of this variable, let's this one. So we have a pass-through rate, which is the ratio of one to the other. And then we have an inequality adjustment. We are proposing here a Gini coefficient, this society is more unequal than country B. This would be, again, hypothetical, the average Gini for the world. And when Kaushik presents his results, they are pretty much up to here. But then, we can also adjust for poverty gap ratio. What's the poverty gap ratio in the countries? We have one country A that is poorer, if you use a poverty gap ratio, than country B. And we have a poverty adjustment for the multidimensional poverty index. People may say, why would we add the multidimensional if we have poverty in all the other dimensions? Because the multidimensional poverty index is the only one that captures correlations of deprivations. And we may want to adjust the GDP per capita according to how correlated, which is who's left behind, how much is people are left behind. We may want to do that. And then, we can adjust for health, like life expectancy at birth. Then the floor could be expected years of the life lost after 40 years at birth. For peace, rights, and governance, some people have suggested to use homicide rates per 100,000. Here are the units of what we're measuring. And then you get to a well-being adjusted GDP that if you use as a reference the middle, meaning the average of the world, those who perform worse will be below. They will have an adjustment that discounts from the original GDP, and those who are above the middle would have an adjustment that's above. If you do that, then the average per capita GDP globally, if you use a reference point, the middle, the average GDP before adjusting and the adjusted GDP, the average for the world would be similar. So that's a property that some people like. But you can see that countries that may start with the same GDP per capita end up with different adjustments for GDP. If you use a reference that is the best scenario in the world, then all the countries would end up with a GDP per capita that's below, everything will be discounted, the unadjusted one, but some would be more below than others. If you use as a reference the worst, then all of them would have a higher adjusted GDP, but some higher than others. So that's the ranking wouldn't change. It is a challenge on how best to communicate the idea of wanting to show what does a shortfall in other deprivations, in other domains, do to economic, to well-being. You start from GDP, but then you include the other shortfalls. What does inequality do to the measure of well-being starting from GDP? And what does deprivation floors do to the adjustment? So you could end up in a ranking that's very different from GDP per capita. Here, the two countries would be the same. Again, this is a hypothetical example. But depending on the characteristics, country A is more unequal, has more poverty multidimensionally also. The life expectancy is lower. The homicides per 100,000 people is higher. And this one was and that leads to a well-being adjusted GDP that is lower than country B, which started with the same, but had a better performance and better than the average in each case. It would have a higher adjusted GDP. I have other toy examples and I have more text here, but I think that at this point, what I want is to share this with the group because, like I said, we need to make the decision of whether we have a headline indicator or not. if we want to have one, whether we adjust it for inequality, which is Kaushik zooming in on that component, or whether we attempt to be more ambitious and adjust it also for other shortfalls and deprivations in other dimensions. The beauty of the proposal that we put together with my co-authors, Marc Fleurbet and Benoit Deserve, is that the indicator we're proposing is modular. So you can add components, add meaning, you can increase the number of components or get rid of them. You can use the weights either determined by the community or by using life satisfaction regressed on the various domains, or other approaches that have been proposed in the literature, like equivalent income. But weights would be determined by a certain proposal and would have economic meaning. The economic meaning is how much income would someone be willing to give up for an additional year in life expectancy, for example? This is important because it would make the trade-offs between the different components completely transparent.
Thank you, Nora.
And that's what we are suggesting. But if, like I said, just a dashboard, a headline indicator with just inequality, or a headline indicator with other dimensions.
Thank you.
Let me stop here. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Nora, for this very rich presentation. I mean, I know, the conceptual framework was very rich, and of course, measuring it is kind of more challenging and richer. So that's why I kind of also indulge in the time, because I think the ideas there are very, very intriguing. And I think it already solicited some questions, all right, in the chat, for instance, which is exactly what we are trying to solicit from this group, all right? So thank you for highlighting a lot of things, the focus on the outcomes, the domains again, and again, they are not cast in stone, but again, they are here, they were in the interim report, but I think we are all open for any feedback from this community as well. The typology of the indicators, the measurement of the environmental sustainability, and obviously the big issue of the headline indicator. Now, all these are questions, all right, that, as I say, we are going to engage in the debate. The last two issues about as you said, the headline indicator and the measurement of the environmental sustainability, we're going to move now actually to some of the more illustrative examples, actually, to unpack them a little bit to the audience here. So let me start by Kaushik. All right, and which again, the issue of the question of the computation of GDP, Kaushik, and what you would like to bring to this debate, please, and to this event. Kaushik, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Martin, for the presentations. Actually, let me start with an important point that Martin brought up, which actually I had a discussion with Joe Stiglitz, who's a part of our HLG. And on this, a little bit of feedback will be very useful from the statistical community. You know, Martin briefly mentioned that there are certain areas where there can be cross-country spillovers. So if you take whatever target, GDP, well-being adjusted GDP that Nora just talked about, if you take anything like that, this is being done at the national level. So it is entirely possible that when I push this indicator up in my nation, I could be doing it, it's an option, by adopting policies which pushes another country down. For instance, I can create spillovers or negative spillovers, environmental spillovers onto another country. This is something that we have to give it a thought. Maybe, after all, we are talking in terms of nation-bound measures. So the negative spillovers, there is nothing much you can do at the level of the measurement. Later, when the United Nations, international organizations are pushing countries into policies, you can say that, look, don't just be selfish and push your own measure up, you can have a negative effect. But as Martin was speaking, I was thinking there is another way out, which is to treat a negative spillover, let us say adjusted GDP is what you're maximizing for your country, which has a negative effect on another country. One way to handle this is create a measure where you take away some of your indicator level for the damage you're doing on someone else, just the way we handle sustainability. You can increase your own per capita GDP, but if it is sustainability sensitive, then if you're doing this by leaving a bigger carbon footprint on the future, we deduct something from your GDP because it's having a negative effect on future generations. So it may be possible to think in terms of cross-country spillovers by taking away something from one country's achievement in case it has a negative effect on someone else. We'll have to give it some thought. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me get into the little bit of focus. I will get into a specific measure, unlike Nora, not because we've decided on that. It's still at a stage which was pointed out. It's work in progress, but because I want some feedback from you all, which could be very useful to us. There are various measures and really lots of important things we are looking at. Subjective well-being, people's perception of how well off they are. But one of the things that I've focused on, where it is possible to do a little bit of statistical measurement, is inequality adjustment to GDP. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from, and after that I will get into my PowerPoint. Inequality matters in many different ways, but one particular kind of inequality which I think is today beginning to have effect, and we've already talked in our zero draft, that we are interested in people having voice. When you have this inequality of the form of few people controlling social media, television channels, newspapers, etc., quite apart from the pure economic inequality, you could be robbing ordinary people of their voice because all the influence gets concentrated at the top, which suggests that you do want a measure where when the country is trying to push it forward, you take something out of that to adjust for it. Now, Elena or whoever is being kind enough to put our PowerPoint over there, if you kindly do that.
See it, Kaushik?
Go ahead, Kaushik.
I can't see it.
Yeah, I cannot see you actually. Maybe that's why. I don't know if there is a technical issue here, but the presentation I can see it. Yeah, and
yeah. Otherwise, I can manage verbally. Can you people see it? Amir, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. The first slide is questions on data and statistics, and a lot of people are seeing it.
Let's go over to the next and the next, where there's a picture of the Gini Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient.
That's where we are, equitable per capita and Lorenz curve. You can guide us which one do you want. Yeah.
Let's go to the next page where there's a picture of the Lorenz curve.
This is where we are. Go ahead, Kaushik.
Okay, so I'm then speaking. I've got a printer in front of me. All of you will be familiar. Yeah, exactly. I can see it now. Thank you very much. So we are all familiar with the inequality measure, which is the Gini coefficient, which has a one-to-one correspondence with the Lorenz curve. And I'm not taking you through that. Let us suppose that we've computed Gini, which means basically you take the shaded area divided by the bottom triangle. So it is going to be an inequality measure E, where E lies between 0 and 1. So if I can go to the next page, I will explain this in a moment.
Go ahead, Elena.
Elena, you can take me to the next page.
We are in the terminology page where the Gini coefficient is explained.
Oh, okay. Somehow it's taking a bit of time on mine, maybe, so I'll talk about this. Now, if we use a plain simple, which is not what we want to do, but if we use a plain simple correction in the per capita GDP, yes, I can see that now. You take the per capita GDP Y, and then 1 minus the inequality measure, the Gini coefficient E. If inequality is sky high equal to 1, that per capita income Y multiplied by that drops to 0. If inequality is 0, then 1 minus E is 1. And GDP is exactly this. Now, there are two corrections I want to make on this. One is, I'm not doing it formally here, but I leave it in your head. I don't think Gini coefficient inequality is the right measure that we want to use. We want to use some form of inequality measure which is sensitive to ordinary people's voice and voice being robbed, which our report is going to talk quite a bit about that. One kind of a measure of that is something on which Thomas Piketty and others have been giving out data as well, which is the gap between the super rich and say the average population. So if we create, so instead of the Gini coefficient, the E could be again lying between 1 and 0, but it's being measured in terms of the gap between the super rich and the average person. If the gap is 0, that is perfect equality. That inequality measure will become inequality is 0. And if the gap is just astronomically high, inequality measure goes to 1. So very similar, but over here, this calculation is with E. Now, you'll see over here, I've suggested that Y multiplied by 1 minus C, we multiply by 2 or 1.6, and I'll explain this in a moment. You know what Nora showed you just now? You take per capita GDP, and then you make those corrections with A1 multiplied by A2 multiplied by A3. It's fine. It has one problem, which we will correct it. It's not a serious problem, that since all of those are fractions, if the number of those A's become very large, this measure is going to go towards 0 for all countries. So what I thought we could do is bump up the average, which will leave the rankings the same. Multiplied by 2 is one of them, and I also did it by multiplied by 1.6 because 1.6 is the median countries. The median country is going to get the same per capita income. Countries which have greater inequality will get a bump down. Countries which have a lower inequality will get a bump up. Now, whether we multiplied by 2 or multiplied by 1.6, as you can all see, the rankings won't matter, but the absolute level will be adjusted to something more visual. If you use this, I've done my exercise with Gini, but when we finally get down to this, I will want some feedback from you as to what kind of inequality we should use. But let me show you what the result is. I've done it for, I think, 21 countries. You begin to get interesting things. It's not important. There's a PowerPoint there with a colorful page. Elena, if you can put that up, do it. But otherwise, I will do without.
It's on, Kaushik.
Okay, so it's the lag. I'm sitting in Mumbai where things are coming with a big lag. So yeah. So you'll see immediately what's happening is once you make this correction, it's not just that the countries are moving down. First of all, I have ensured that won't happen because by multiplying by 2 or 1.6, countries also get a bump up. The interesting thing that will happen is countries begin to change rank. Denmark is going to overtake United States and have a higher adjusted per capita GDP. Philippines is going to cross over South Africa. Sri Lanka is going to cross over South Africa. So you will begin to see these changes. Finland will become higher than Germany. You will begin to see these changes. That, I think, is crucial because countries do watch where they are ranked. This, again, one experience from my World Bank time, ease of doing business. Some of you will know that. Countries are ranked in terms of how easy it is to do business. And somehow the ranking jarred countries. If you go down, you feel troubled by that. If you have a higher rank, you feel very good about that. And that would start off a competition. What these measures, if we do it right, since they will cause some flipping of rankings, it will give the right kind of incentive that, look, earlier we were moving up this ranking by looking at GDP and nothing else. But the way this HLG has started computing and putting out across countries, we need to do something about these other measures in terms of inequality I spoke about just now, but what Martin talked about earlier about a negative effect on other countries, you have to look at that. After all, our sole aim cannot be pushing for higher growth in terms of GDP. Growth is important, but it is not the last word. there are these additional things that you have to be aware of. Let me stop with that because I do want to listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaushik, again for another rich presentation. And as we say, it does complement well what Nora has said as a case in point, really, and an illustration of the implication of the effect of one adjustment, in this case, the inequality, for example, and also highlighting that the Gini in this case was just an illustrative in the metrics of your formula. All right. And again, I think you ended up with an important thing that the group is looking for positive incentives. It's not looking for penalizing any country or anything, but it's really looking for positive incentives for the well-being of the people and the planet. So I think these are very critical, important points. And I see they have already, as I said, like Nora and Martin, they already elicited some very rich comments in the chat. Before I go to NAM and given the time constraints that we have, I would really encourage all the participants to put actually as much as they can now, their input, their questions, their ideas in the chat. We will come back to the chat. We will collect it. We'll go thoroughly through it. But as I say, given the richness of the debate, I really don't want to interrupt the flow of the ideas and the presentation. But please feel free, all of you, to use the chat until we move to the living floor immediately after NAM presentation, who is actually going to address part of one of the chat questions, which about the thinking about the measurement of the environmental sustainability. So within the dashboard, actually, also. So NAM, without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you, Amnor. Elena, could you please share my slide? Oh, thank you. Let me start with the basic problem we are trying to solve. Sustainability measurement faces a very simple but fundamental challenge. Different indicators answer different questions. When we try to compress everything into a single number, we often create conflicting or misleading narratives. A country may look successful on one indicator while facing serious risks on another. So our response is deliberately modest but important. We separate environmental limits from development performance. This is not about adding complexity. It is about avoiding misinterpretation, especially in official statistics that guide policy decisions. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by dual framing? We work with two complementary indicator families. First, planetary boundary indicators, which act as constraints. Second, wealth indicators, which measure performance within those limits. They are not substitutes, and they should not be aggregated into single index. So here, the key distinction is very intuitive. Can we safely do this? We talk about boundaries. How well are we doing within those limits? That is about wealth. This separation is essential for clarity, especially for communication with policymakers. Next slide, please. So let me briefly explain the boundary side on the left-hand side of the slide. Planetary boundary indicators assess whether societies operate within a safe biophysical space. Their role is to signal risks, not to score performance. Systematic risks here, ecological overshoot, and the risk of irreversible damage. In the HLG framework, we focus on 6 pressure areas: air pollution using population-weighted BM 2.5, climate stability using greenhouse gas emissions relative to a 1.5 degree pathway, land system change, freshwater use, biodiversity through the Biodiversity Intactness Index, and biogeochemical flows, such as nitrogen surplus. 2 points are critical for you statisticians. Benchmarks must be explicit and transparent. And the second point is that we focus on distance to the boundary, not on the simple pass and fail judgment. Think of it like we have a speed limit, and knowing how close you are matters more than binary legal or illegal. Now let me turn on the wealth indicators on the right-hand side. The wealth indicators measure long-term productive capacity. Here we have produced capital, human capital, and natural capitals. So they answer the question, are we building or running down the assets that support future well-being? So the key principle is very clear, that wealth gains do not justify crossing environmental boundaries. The proposed indicators include the adjusted net savings, natural capital value, inclusive wealth index, ecosystem services value. The important message is these are diagnostic tools, not exact sustainability tests. They help us understand change and trade-offs. But they are not verdicts. Next slide, please. So these slides show how the dual framing works in the dashboards. In the dashboard, the dual framing sits mainly in the sustainability domain, sustainability dimension. Within the environment domain, we have 7 domains. And here I just give an example of the environment domains. So here we use the 2-layer structures, the boundaries as constraints, and the wealth indicators as performance diagnostics. So this is an asymmetric integration, and the boundaries discipline interpretation, and the wealth indicators are never read in isolation, right? So this structure allows countries to report progress while still being honest about the ecological risks as the constraints show you, like greenhouse gas emission per capita, that the boundaries for the sustainability and the performance would be the inclusive wealth index, for example. Next, please. So this is really the core motivation. So without clear limits, we risk narratives where the economic or human capital gains mask the environmental degradation. In practice, wealth indicators can increase while the ecosystem degrade. And it is not only a problem of bad application. We know that the shadow price are uncertain. The shadow prices in the wealth measurement, that is uncertain. The future risks and the irreversibility are very hard to value, and these challenges are structural, not accidental. So the boundaries therefore act as like an independent safeguard. They do not excuse weak wealth accounting. They protect decision makers from false reassurance. So you can think of boundaries as guardrails. They do not tell you how fast to go, but they prevent you from driving off the road. Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. So let me close with a few key points. First, there is no single sustainability number that can do justice for the complexity of the development or environmental risks. Trying to force everything into one index often creates confusing rather than clarity in terms of sustainability. Second, the HLG framework, our framework is built on a clear separation of roles. We have boundaries, defined limits. They tell us what is not acceptable because it creates systematic risks. We have wealth indicators, which are diagnostics, and they help us to understand long-term trends and intergenerational trade-offs, but only within those limits defined by the boundaries. Third, this approach aligns well with what Statistical Office already do. It is consistent with national accounts and with the sea, rather than competing with them or replacing them. And finally, the emphasis on transparency, comparability, and credibility. Assumptions are made very explicit. Risks are visible, we know that, and indicators are easier to interpret responsibility. So the dual framing here is about clarity. Not talking about perfection. So that is all about the dual framing for measuring the environmental sustainability. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nam. I mean, again, it just adds to the richness of this event and to the richness of the anticipated debate that already has started, and obviously the complexity of trying to reconcile two indicator families, all right, which is by itself kind of a taxing effort, all right. And as I say, the ideas behind that you presented are here to have some feedback on them, as we said. But I think the bottom line is that when you are reconciling two such indicator families and approaches, there have to be choices and judgment calls at the end that has to be done. As you said, there is no sustainability number that will come by itself from probably the process, all right. But I think we'll have to do some things. But I think the principles that you highlighted in terms of really that any number will have to meet the issues of transparency, comparability, and credibility, all right, are guiding principles, all right, and also the issue of the alignment with statistical standards and system are key in your approach and in your thinking on what you are presenting here in terms of trying to align all this with not only the reconciliation, but the compatibility also with the thinking of the dashboard and the conceptual framework that has been laid in this event as well. So thank you very much, Nam, for that. Now, we still have 30 minutes, all right, a little bit less than 30 minutes. I see that there is an amazing already inputs, ideas, and presented and questions. And I'm really encouraged by all the chat kind of conversations that is happening. And I would encourage you to continue using the chat again to put all these ideas, questions, solutions that you can see, etc. All right. It would be very helpful if you kind of put at the end either your kind of name or affiliation as well. All right. I think we can track them, but some of them, at least on my part, I can see them as unknown, but I see the initiative, so we can track them. But I think it would be really extremely helpful to know the affiliation or the name, so that also if we want to come back on any of this, we can come back specifically on them. All right. So I'm going to open the floor. And having put things in the chat is not really to block the discussion of the interactive floor. We are trying to also get some initial responses. Nora and Kaushik and others has already started engaging in the chat as well. All right, but I think it would be very useful if we can use this 25 minutes that we have for really taking the floor and really presenting the bulk of your ideas, at least, is that some of you even have submitted in the chat if you wish. You don't have to dwell into them, but I think it would be very useful to have some initial feedback from the experts on any of this, whether on the conceptual ideas, the innovative and novelties that we presented, or the metrics and the thinking behind the metrics. So I see that we are already having some callers. I start with Timothy Reschler, and then I'll move to Leonard Santos de Oliveira. You can put your camera. I understand they are going to be, and then after that we'll move on to Edwin Horling's number 3. So Timothy, you have the floor. And as I said, I think I assume you can put your camera if you wish, or you can just use your unmute yourself here. Timothy Reschler, would you like to come in? Clarence, I assume they are empowered. Can you unblock Clarence? Okay, I think they are empowered now.
There
so
we
go
go.
ahead, Timothy. Yeah,
Thank you.
Exactly. My apologies
Thank
for
you.
that.
So yes, took me a second there. Okay, thank you very much, esteemed colleagues. I have not I've given up trying to follow the chats because I've wanted to make absolute 110% value out of the quality of the contributions being made live. I will just summarize 3 or 4 points, and I will try to follow up either by text or putting something in the chat later. I'm a former Statistics Canada employee, long time serving. I currently am a contractor in the Middle East working with various UN projects, and I've worked in the UAE. I would commend the group's work to cover all of the main themes that I've been thinking about as I think about sustainability and future issues and measurement from a statistical perspective. I also will, based on 30 years experience, try and emphasize a couple of aspects which might encourage us to kind of expand a bit, a couple of dimensions of issues as we tackle this. One is that as statisticians, we all know the sin that we can commit of omission by doing a lot of complex intellectual and numerical work and producing indicators and I call them throwing it over the wall to somebody who needs to catch it and understand what they'll do with it. And I think this emphasizes Nam's point that we do not help the discussion in the policy world or in the action world by making things that are too complex. So my first comment is, let's give some attention. This actually pushes forward Nora's maxim that she presented to us, measure what you treasure. And one nuance that I add to that is measure what you can do something about. So if we have to realize that politicians, decision makers, and people get pushed into doing something, we need to set that up in a way that they can do something about what we're describing. So that's an aspect there. Related to that is this concept of scale. So as a geographer, I'm a geographer, population geographer, and a statistician. We talk about the externalities and spillovers. And one way to look at that is to kind of, we all know about the effects of regions, but as a geographer, I wonder whether some of these things need to be brought up from the country to the regional level, so that when we report, wealth, capability, environmental sustainability, what does it matter if we're reporting that for Burkina Faso? What does it matter that we're reporting that for small countries? What matters is that we're reporting that for regions, because people live in regions and they consume resources in regions, which actually calls into account this issue about globalization. I'm acutely aware of that working in the Middle East now, where there really is functionally no fresh water, and most foodstuffs come from outside the region. If that doesn't spell risk from an environmental perspective, I don't know what does, right? So that's one thing.
Timothy, I don't want to interrupt you, but I mean, if you can wrap up, because to be fair to the others, so maybe just everybody can focus on 1 or 2 main ideas and messages, and I'm sorry for that, but your points are already well taken. Yeah, go ahead, Timothy, to wrap up. Yeah.
Final point. We, as statisticians, we will get around to this, but we don't usually make it our first consideration, confidence limits. So it's all nice to talk about these indicators, but is there really a kind of confidence limit beyond which this is meaningless to talk about, right? So we talk about quartiles or tertiles or whatever. So some thinking that would address that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Timothy. And again, I apologize, but as I say, moving forward, I would really appreciate trying to stick to your first one or two key messages that you would like the experts to take or to respond to. All right. And I think Timothy had already raised some issues. So if we can avoid also repetitions on issues that has been raised, all right, whether the issue of that would be great. So Leonardo Santos. Leonardo, yeah.
Olá.
Go ahead, Leonardo.
Olá.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Go ahead.
Nice to meet you. I'm very pleased to see your work in Brazil. We are working on that also for some years, and we are looking for new measures to go beyond GDP. We release some of them that are very close to the one that we present, that we see you present. So I would really like to have some moment to share the experience of our measure and what you are proposing in more detail with some experts of yours. I think this would be nice. And we trying to use not the GDP, but disposable income. And I see that disposable income can be a better measure than GDP for your proposal at first class. And we are using some multidimensional poverty index to do the adjustment of the disposable income. So we have the disposable income as resource that we have, and the loss of quality of life as some way to adjust the disposable income to get a measure of development. It's very related with your work and your proposals. So we like to share the experience and talk about with someone. And there is one thing that surprised me on the presentation is that when you suggest to use the inequality based on the super rich, some countries that are well known for that inequality, like Brazil, there was red in the table, in the first column in the table, become green in the last column of the table. So I think you could think more about the inequality measure. For us, we don't use a direct inequality measure. We use a poverty index, a multidimensional poverty index that is inequality sensitive to. So when we use that index, we are already adjust for some inequality in some sense. Yeah. And we like to share.
Leonardo, can I just, sorry to interrupt you again. I think what you're raising are really critical country experience that we are seeking. All right. And I think I would really urge you and appeal to you honestly, because it's going to be extremely beneficial to the experts to share these experiences in the chat or contact us. You have on the website actually our contacts exactly as a follow-up to the debate. And this is not addressed only to you, but all to the chief statisticians and country statisticians which are here who would like to share exactly what you're saying. Everything you said is relevant to actually the thinking and the kind of narrowing and tying down of the metric thinking that is happening now. So we would be really grateful. Yes, Nora, go ahead quickly.
Sorry, just one thing, Leonardo, yes, please do share it. I know that you guys wanted to share it in the ECLAC meeting as well, but I just wanted to clarify that what we're adjusting in the end is disposable income, household disposable income, so we're on the same page. And let's continue the discussion.
Exactly. No, I think that's why, I mean, I'm really encouraging to put that, Leonardo, and we'll follow up on that. So again, I'll move to Edwin now, and then after that to Richard Hayes. But again, maybe 2 minutes would really be grateful. Edwin?
I'll try and keep it short. Two concerns. One is we're working in the expert group on well-being measurement on the exact same thing, and in other task forces and other working groups, we're working on parts of the same work, all from within the United Nations. And how do we ensure that our work remains aligned so that we're not working at cross purposes, we're looking at the same kinds of concepts and definitions? Because essentially what you're doing is exactly the same as the expert group is doing. Of course, in the expert group, we're working with NSOs from around the world. I think Richard's going to say more about this in a minute. And we're doing more of the detailed grinding work, which takes a long time. And you're looking at a very high level and putting down a really strong vision. That's one point of concern. The other is related to your composite, the well-being adjusted GDP. Now, as part of the expert group, thinking about what well-being is, inclusive and sustainable well-being, we're also looking at possibilities, looking at the world beyond GDP from other perspectives. For example, what if you look at society as a social phenomenon, regardless of what the economy is doing? What if we look at the planet from an environmental perspective, where people live, regardless of what the economy is doing? Why start with GDP as the basis and start to add or subtract? This is a very strong normative point that I think you can address very well, and that the United Nations will have to maintain over time. Let's keep it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. No, I think these are really two critical points as well. And allow me to try to address the first one a little bit, because I am in a position actually to try to address it from my position here and also not only as a member of the expert group of well-being measurement, a chief in the UNSD, but also the lead of the project for the Beyond GDP. I think that's where the dots connect. All right, and where the dots connect, I think we are connecting and working very well with the expert group of well-being measurement. I think Richard will come back to that. But I think one of the key things that Nora also highlighted in her presentation about the measurement metrics is that the focus by the HLG is going to be ultimately on outcomes, on the outcome indicators level. All right. And that leaves a lot of work, as we say, to the inputs and the drivers and to the efforts indicators, all right, that works that could be done. And we look forward actually to this work to be done exactly to connect to the point that was made at the very beginning with Timothy, to lead at the end to kind of a meaningful uptake by the policymaking, all right, because we know that this is going ultimately to be outcome or headline indicators, all right, but the efforts and the context of all this will have to come from you, from statisticians and from the UN NSOs and the country context and so on. So I think that's one point I would like to say. The other point, it's a very fair point, whether the headline indicator has to be a function of GDP. All right, Nora, I see you gonna, but let me just finish. I would appreciate that. I'll give the floor to all of you at the end. That's why I'm kind of rushing a little bit. So
yeah,
I give
I'm
the
gonna
floor
have
to all
to
of you.
leave because I have another meeting, remember? So that's why I wanted to clarify now, because I have to. We have the other consultation.
So let me go to Richard, and then I will move.
Okay, can I just please respond to this? Because one thing is that I suggest to the Secretariat very strongly that we organize a meeting once we have our proposal finished with the other initiatives, a small group to discuss, to see where the alignments and misalignments are, so that we do not send conflicting messages. It's very important. The second thing is that, Edwin, the mathematical specification starts from GDP, but it's not a necessity. It's a versatile, so you could start with something else. You could adjust other things. You could have no GDP there. But this is, this is just one way of going beyond GDP, and that's why we use it as a starting point. But it's a versatile formulation. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Nora. Rich, would you like to come in, Richard, please?
Thank you. And I want to just congratulate the team. Being able to look at this on a really wide perspective and being innovative, I think, is essential. And I see the EGWM, our work has been very much more grounded in reuse of existing measures and efforts to reduce burden. So I see the potential for us to bring those two together as really existing. And I completely agree with what Nora just said. My 2 points, we're going to touch on timeliness. We all know that people misuse GDP. They don't misuse it because it's a good conceptual match. They misuse it because it comes out regularly, it's granular, it's got a long back series. And in the end, I think one of the things we've learned from our work is that we need to be competitive with GDP on all of those bases, not just being a better conceptual fit. So thinking about the indicators you talked about today, how we can produce those on a timely, say, quarterly basis, I think is for me one of the key tests of viability that we can explore. And just touching on Edwin and Nora have both touched on this, GDP as a base. In the UK, we estimate about a third of all goods and services consumed by households are produced either from the environment or from household production outside of GDP. So if we are using GDP as a base, we just need to be aware that that fraction is changing over time amongst different countries and could tell a very different story. But excellent presentations and really exciting work. Really looking forward to seeing the final report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you also for sharing the latest point, which is anchored in your own kind of experience on actually starting for GDP for some adjustments actually also. So Ihsan, and then I have Fabiola, and then I'm going to move to the experts actually for some closing remarks. Ihsan, and really 2 minutes for each, please. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to very briefly repeat the question that I put in the chat, which is one was around just the concerns from NSOs that they are already so stretched with the work they're doing around the SDGs, and of course now with the next the sort of the post 2030 agenda kicking off. So thinking about complementarities, and I think the other question is really about almost maybe looking a little bit further ahead, leapfrogging a few more months into the future. What do you see as the intergovernmental process playing out? Is that going to be within an existing process like the SNA, or are you envisaging a new intergovernmental process? Thank you so much.
All right. No, thank you very much. The issue of the capacity of the NSOs to carry this, of course, is a big issue. I'll leave it to the experts. I think it's on the radar as well. All right. On the intergovernmental process, I think it's embedded in the mandate that an intergovernmental process will have to be carried out separate, actually. I think the intention in the negotiation, if I understood correctly, is that it will have to be followed in the plenary, and we will have to have a separate process for that. But this will have to become after. We submit the recommendations and they are vetted by the HLG, and the HLG submit and convey to the General Assembly. So this intergovernmental process will become afterwards, and we will be consulting closely with the President of the General Assembly on that and others on how best to proceed and have this carrying over in intergovernmental process. So, but that's yet to come. Fabiola Ricardini, please.
Yes. Can you listen to me?
We can.
Okay. So I'm trying to organize a little bit the ideas on this process. If we discuss typology or kind of measure we need for well-being, equity, and sustainability, for change the objective of our politicians, I think that we need to separate levels and also method. When I think levels, I think macro level, in which the dashboard of indicators are developed. Let's say outcome indicators, distributional indicators, sustainability indicators, or risk resilience indicators, and so on. So we are in the level of indicators. Then there is another level, the macro level, let's say the flow and stocks measure as international accounts, and we discuss, for example, income and wealth adjusted measure, taking consideration social and environmental concept, along with the economic one, the GDP one for until now developed. Then there is another level, the level of the models for policy evaluation. We do not forget that also we need to develop methodology for developing new models, because until now we have only GDP models focused. So we need, there are many countries that are experimenting in developing sustainability models and so on. So I suggest that we cannot forget that there is also this third level, the models environment that we take in consideration. Of course, micro levels, macro levels, and models, or all of them are interrelated, of course. But I think if we want to go in details in developing methodology and concept, also we need to share document on methodology and concept and try to go in details in our discussion. Otherwise, I think all the time we start again with the concept, discussion, content, and methodology. So if this is just a suggestion, if you can produce documents, methodological documents for discussion, and please take in consideration these three different levels: indicators, national accounts measure, and models. So
thank you.
This is my intervention.
Thank you very much, Fabiola, and thank you for sharing these ideas. I'm sure they're going to also be looked at carefully. All right. Now I'm going to have to wrap this. All right. I'm going to wrap it by going back to the experts. And I don't know, Nora, I know you want to leave, but I think if we can go the other way around, we're going to wrap up in 2 or 3 minutes. I'll start with Nam. All right. Then going to maybe we just go with it. Nam, would you like to come in with any comments? Nam, would you like to come in with any comments and maybe in 1 minute share final thoughts?
Thank you very much. I saw there is one question and comment on the context-based sustainability framework, and I think that is a good comment. But you know, so this is how to say that to explain it will take more than like 5 minutes, but I will take it into account when reshaping and adjusting the way that and finalizing the way that our embedding of the environmental sustainability in the framework.
Thank you. No, thank you very much, Nam. As it has been said, and as Nora said, this is actually this is really a beginning of a conversation at a more deeper level. All right. So we are going to look into this. We're going to look at what's everything in the chat. We're going to come back to you, and you please reach out to us as well. All right. So this is an invite for all of you to continue this conversation offline, please. All right. Having said that, Martine, would you like to come in?
Well, given the time, very briefly only, thank you very much for all the comments on the chat. Yes, indeed, we should look at them very carefully. I haven't had the chance to read them all, but I would like just to say 2 things. I think we were reminded, and I think it's Timothy when he started that, or someone else, that we need to make sure that this is going to be used, right? I mean, this is intellectually can be extremely interesting, but at the end of the day, what we're going to propose needs to be used by policymakers, and the uptake is essential. So simplicity, should remain in on our dashboard to some extent, being parsimonious and being understandable by the policymakers and by the public at large, because otherwise we will fail to actually make a change. So I think we really need to make sure as a group, our group, and that was a good reminder, interestingly, from statisticians, probably because sometimes they are frustrated by the fact that they're producing work that is not being used. But this is part of the whole data sort of and statistics life cycle, where you produce, you have the concept, you produce, but at the end, you want to make sure that this is being used and it makes a difference. So there will be part of our report, at least if we have the time, on the capacity building, which means that countries need to be able to produce this data and using what already exists. And second, making sure that there is communication around what we do so that it's easily understood, so that it's being useful. So that was a good reminder that I take from some elements of the chart, in the chart. Thank you.
No, absolutely, Martina. And thank you for this critical point and for the assurance also that all these points are actually critical indeed, and they are in the mind of the expert group. I'll go to Nora now. All right, and then I'll end with Kaushik.
Sorry, I have to leave.
Go ahead, Nora.
We are already in the other. They're waiting for me. So the only thing I want to emphasize, because I think the concern of overburdening the national statistical offices is very well taken, and that the SNA 2025 is already going to be very demanding if it's going to be implemented in full. But what we're trying to do is identify indicators that are already being collected within the SDG Chapeau and others, and that have custodian agencies that therefore it doesn't mean that it's going to be additional information to be collected in general, but this is for the present. We may recommend additional indicators, but something for the future. But for now, I think that we're not trying to do something that will result in additional burdens to the national statistical offices. And with that, I leave, and I thank really everybody very much. And let's emphasize the fact that this is the beginning of a conversation, and we look forward to receiving your comments by email and meeting down the road.
Thank you, Nora. I'll move to Kaushik now. And Kaushik, I know actually you wanted to leave earlier, so I hope the fact that you are still with us.
Yeah.
Good point. I mean, so Kaushik, please come in. We can see you, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
No, this has been extremely valuable, and I've been reading some of the chats as well. And takeaway for me, in the end, you want action and the intergovernmental process, which Hassan was talking about, is important. We will pay attention to that. And the last point, Fabiola making about models, policy models, which are pegged on GDP, if we can shift them to a new pegging, which entails critically, I'm taking Richard Hayes' point, that we have to come up with some measures which will give regular data coming out, quarterly data, annual fine, but if you can get it into a quarterly data coming out, that becomes a natural incentives because politicians and policymakers begin to observe that. So we have to keep those end goals in mind and then work the next lap, which is going to start day after tomorrow when we meet together. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Kaushik. And thank you to all. Really, I'm grateful to this dialogue, and I'm grateful to your contributions as experts. And thanks also again to Shantanu for opening remarks and everything. But thanks also mainly to the constituency that responded to this call, all right, and to your engagement and to your ideas which are shared on the chat and in this conversation. It's been fascinating. We can never give justice in 2 hours to all this kind of in-depth kind of thinking and unpack these complex ideas, but I think we did well, and I hope we can agree that, as it has been said, it's the beginning of a conversation. Reach out to us. We will reach out to you. The fact that we're still ending with more than 200 or close to 250 people, it's a testimony to this kind of lively debate and ideas. So without further ado, I thank you all for this lively debate and for this lively conversation, and hopefully we'll continue our conversation. Thank you, and with this, we'll end the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.